Welcome everyone. The topic for the day is safety permits. We will be talking about the safety permits today. What are required things that ensures least less number of accidents have been within the company's premises. So safety work permits spells out on the basis of the nature of the jobs, on the type of the equipment involved, the duration that you people have been exposed on, obviously yes, the location and the personal involved. So these are the five factors that on which the safety work permits system works around it. It's a technically measured documents to prevent hazard and accidents from happening. Remember, it's a technical measured documents. Depending upon what are those are nature of the job, equipment involved, time limitations, location, person involved. So let us work about the work permit system. The permit to work is a written record of a document which is raised by shift in charge or area in charge. Now this can be a functional in charge also, and authorized a safety personnel permitting them to work in a specified time in a definitive area to ensure the responsibilities of the individual goes on. These work permit will identify the hazards to the personnel and equipment thereby. Please understand it is to be raised by the supervisor in concern, the work area, the managers in concern, the functional area, whatever you're looking into it, because they will be responsible for any untoward accident in case something happens to the employee or the worker, the safety permit personnel. These work permits, remember, will identify the hazards fully to the personnel in terms of property. So, general principles with respect to the work system, we need to entail the human factors, the management of work permit system. That is what the short form of WPS is all about. It the poor skilled manpower, lack of knowledge, incompetence, objective of work permit system, the type of work permit required, and the content of work permit. Now, believe me or not, there are different permits that comes around it. If people are working with the fire department, if people are working in a hazardous chemical department, if people are working in a radiation department, look at it. We have to ensure that the person who is working should be fully knowledgeable about what are the hazard, what are the experiences, the outcome that can come across it. So we need to understand, and it all boils down to lack of knowledge. People should be made aware of the crux that comes around it. This is what we are looking into it, be it human factor, management, the poor skilled manpower, incompetence, objective, types of work, content of work. At the end of the day, it's the lack of knowledge which becomes very detrimental to the consumer. So, contributory factors considering the work permit system or safety permit system, whether staff has been sufficiently informed, whether he's aware of it or not, whether he has been trained or not, have been instructed, duly instructed, supervised, whether the work permit contains sufficient important about the type of the work that you're going around it. You are been telling what kind of work that you're going to go, what kind of materials you're going to handle. Are there provision available for the work permit system? Are there sufficient uh, personal protective equipment there for the work to be carried out in a safe manner? Whether the employee is responsible for the control of the maintenance work, that needs to be understood, and most importantly would be whether the equipment has been regularly monitored, regularly inspected, regularly reviewed, and thereby other contributory factors to the work permit system is the documentation part. Remember, this documentation part should be a ready reference, a handy reference to what eventualities have happened previously and how you are going to deviate or probably take into consideration of what is going to happen in the future. So that is what you do about it, how you tackle based on the past data. So sufficient precaution needs to be taken about it. We are talking about draining, flushing, environmental risk assessment, everything that comes around it, whether it's of a fall protection, whether it's an exposure to chemical or radiation, what you name it, and we have it. Whether staffs are aware of the environment, they're working during the operation of the work permits, flammable, corrosive, explosive units that we are looking into it. The personnel responsible for operating the plant has to be aware of the type of maintenance work involved, how long it is likely to take for the of the work. Remember, major hazard. If you are not following it, what happens is it's a wrong information of the work that has been relayed to. It is failure to understand the hazard or the equipment or the resource material that the person is handling around there. It is failure to signify or intimate the ignition point that is there. Probably remember the triangle of fire is all about combustion, temperature, and oxygen. If you are going to eliminate, and how you are going to, what are the possibilities or probabilities of presence of all the three elements within the vicinity of work area. The instruction need to be adhered. If not, on the failure of isolated plant and drainage. So major hazard is to failure have over the plant safe condition. Probably it's not been reviewed. It's not been serviced well. Things not been mentioned well. The work is incomplete, and so on and so forth. Unauthorized persons working on the work permit. Definitely, when I say unauthorized, I say a person with ill knowledge. I say a person with ill equipped. I say a person with ill trained. Poor management is what we are again going to blame out if there are any untoward incident and insufficient monitoring permit system. Now let us understand what are the various types of work permit or safety permit that is available into it. First and the foremost is the hot work permit. These are based on the temperature. There are many things that been done on a very high temperature, be it running of a diesel engine, be it running of a coke oven, you name it, and we have it. Yeah, then there's something called safety and entry point work permit, where probably there is lot of breaking and mining activities that have been carrying out here. We need to understand the acid area work permit, the working at a higher permit where the chances of falling down is very high. Then if there is a hot work permit, there is a cold work permit also, which might give you a numbness on your limbs if you are not properly clothed. And the excavation work permit that comes around with it. Yes, it's a pitfall that comes around, and it is very dangerous in such areas. Let me explain each of these work permit as detailed as possible for all of you. Remember, during the process of work where ignition comes out, it is the heat which is generated, and that is what we need to understand or comprehend in terms of hot area work. So we are talking about welding, we are talking about flame cutting, we are talking about pneumatic or hydraulic power, talking about what precautions can be taken. Very well to be understood what precautions to be taken. First and foremost thing, they should be properly tested within that these area is beyond the explosive range. Remember the triangle that I've been trying to tell it to you about combustion, temperature, and oxygen. Cleaning or ventilation can clear explosive content. You have to, it should be well ventilated area that we are working around it. It should be cover all the pits, all the sumps, all the opening with fireproof material. Ensure that there are no elements that encourages fire to happen. We need to understand whether the adequate firefighting mechanism is in place. Are there fire extinguisher out there? Are there fire hydraulic system there? If it is available, you should be aware where it has been based. Let us move to the safe entry or the vessel entry permits. This is where we need to understand only authorized persons are supposed to enter the vessel. Why? Because safe hot work permit system should be issued only when the work is done in the vessel. Example of vessel are tanks, drums, boilers, furnace, barrels, pipelines, sewers, pit. The hazard may be presence of the toxic inflammable vapors of gases, suffocation due to the lack of oxygen, and slipping and falling, which is we are talking it out time and again. Now we'll talk about the safe entry or vessel entry permits. Why do we go around it? Is the drain clear wash equipments vessel to make it free, toxic flammable gases and other harmful substances. Test the vessel inside, determine the presence of explosive mixture. Remember the combustion, temperature, and oxygen. If there are any deficiency of oxygen, further ventilate the workroom till the oxygen content increase to 17 odd percent. That is very true. increase ventilation. I presume first and foremost thing is increased ventilation. If it is a closed environment, put in an exhaust fan, have your ventilation being circulated, isolate the equipment, the vessel from all sources and from where combustion can take place. Any sparks, any energy, any stock that is harmful to it in case of deficiency of oxygen cannot be improved. Entry of explosive should be restricted. This is where the combustible element or equipment or fuel or greases should be avoided altogether. We talk about the excavation permits. The hazard in excavation are breaking the pipelines altogether. What does it result into? It result into accident. It result into disruption. It result into loss of life, the loss of property, and in communication. So what do we have? It we have consequential event happening. It at time it leads to serious, grievous injuries. It leads to death, eventual death. So I don't want to have any loss of life. If there are no loss of life, I would love to also protect my property, so there should not be any loss of property. If there are no loss of property, I would love to have my productivity intact, so there should not be no delay in production. So remember this thing, there has to be no communication error, no accident the together. So, what precautions can be taken? Permits can be prepared with the help of the factory plan and sent to the engineer manager for counter signage. Put in, take in faith, trust from all possible sources, and encourage them to come forward. Plant in charge engineer would suggest a special precautions to avoid accident. Yes, because they will be having the right know-how out there. After counter signing, permit can be used to execute the receiver, and eventually suitable personal protective equipment are needs to be understood or undertaken. Now let us understand what is industrial hygiene. It's a defined as a science of preservation. It's a defined as a science of improvement. For whom? For the health and the comfort of the worker. Remember, a science to improve preservation and improvement for the sake of the workers and only workers we are talking about it. The overall growth of an industrial hygienist must be to protect the workers from health hazards environment. Now, what are the unhygienic working environment that comes around there? Those are exposure to ultraviolet rays, those are exposure to X-rays, radioactive radiation, vibration that work, probably where the machine is always moving, we cannot know around it. So we tend to lose our focus. Improper lighting shows barricades in our vision. Process involving handling of poisonous chemical hazardous substances. We need to understand what are the noises that comes around it been emitted, the heat that has been dumping out, the dust, the fumes, the vapors that it is emitting. And these are all unhygienic environment. All you need to understand, if we can make our environment noiseless, if we can make an environment smokeless, if we can make our environment any form of radiation less, vibration less, absolutely dark less, and then that is what I would term as the right thing to. So chemical hazard, risk of chemical hazard, because it leads to severe injuries of that toxic property. It can enter the body through the skin, through the nose, through your mouth, in terms of inhalation, ingestion, and skin absorption. What does it gives me? It gives me an acute effect, immediate effect of ammonia and acid bases that comes around here. Then comes the chronic effect, which is a prolonged exposure that comes around. Prolonged exposure which needs to be taken around altogether. We have to take it. The local effect is the effect confined to the affected part. It is probably localized. It doesn't spread in your body. It is systematic effect, completes one or other system. It can go into your lungs. It can go into your stomach. It can rupture your spleen and things like that. What I'm trying to tell you about the carbon monoxide inhalation, the sulfuric acid inhalation, the aniline poisoning or benzening poisoning as the fire and explosion. Here is the most important thing. What happens when the chemicals have a flash point which is equal to or less than 27 degrees centigrade? Under most of the conditions where our planet is located, this is the most habitable temperature, or what we call as a room temperature. A vicinity of 24 to 30 degrees centigrade is what we actually vibrate around it. So sufficient If that amount of temperature is there, it is sufficient to ignite in a year. For example, petrol or benzene, some chemical burns with explosion, some under high pressure, and it has a possibility of making a huge. So we come to the last part of the thing. It would be your dust, solid particle generated by handling and grinding of the rapid impact. Now this might be your wood industry that we can talk about. This might be your iron smelting industry that we are talking around it. It can be anything that comes around it. It releases a lot of dust, lot of fine particles such as rocks, such as ores, such as mining, such as grain, such as wood that comes around it. So we will need to eliminate such things. No permit required. At the same time, it is always there are certain industries where there is absolutely no permit required because it needs to be work around the standard operating procedure, the SOP, which is issued by the manufacturer through the servicing manuals. Competent personnel, site supervisor perform their task on their. The no objection certificate. What is a no objection certificate? It is a document which tells that there is complete permit been issued to for a safety precaution before the start of the work. So there might say yes, this is fit to work. The NOC will tell this is fit to work and all safety precautions have been adhered to. So that is always issued at the beginning of the work. Now why do we have other certificate that comes around under NOC or no objection certificate? Number one is confined space entry certificate when you are going underground. Clearance of excavation certificate when you are bringing out things from the earth. Then we have the clearance of to move heavy equipment. Yes, definitely, yes, what we need to do. Movement of heavy equipment is a hazardous work and might lead to a lot of dangerous consequences. Movement of heavy vehicles and isolations confirmation certificate where we actually isolate the person, isolate certain substances, material which are of hazardous nature. That remember, whatever you do, you need to keep a note of it. Whatever you do, exactly keep a note of it, because that note becomes a ready reference for the next person working in the next shift, or a ready reference in sometime future to understand what why exactly it happened. It tells you about the records of the movement of personnel in restraint, in hazardous zone, movement of the people, movement of the materials, everything. With this, I come to an end of this presentation. Thank you for watching this video.